The night my son read my will aloud in front of the entire family, he believed he was announcing his victory. He stood at the head of my dining table, wearing a charcoal suit, holding a thick legal document in both hands. His wife sat beside him with a glass of red wine and a smile she was trying to hide. My 2 grandchildren watched nervously. My sister, my nephew, and several close relatives sat in complete silence. My son cleared his throat and began reading. According to the document in his hands, he would inherit my house, my retirement accounts, my investments, my vehicles, and every valuable possession I had collected during 46 years of work. My grandchildren would receive almost nothing. The cancer foundation my late wife supported would receive nothing. My younger sister would receive nothing. The document even gave my son control of my medical decisions if I became ill again. He read every paragraph slowly, enjoying the attention. When he reached the final page, he looked directly at me and said, "Dad, I think this proves we all understand what you wanted." I nodded. Then I reached beneath my chair and placed another folder on the table. "You're right," I said. "It proves exactly what you wanted." The smile disappeared from his face. He did not know the will he had just read was the forged copy my attorney had allowed him to find. He did not know every conversation he had with the dishonest paralegal who helped him had been recorded. He did not know the real will had already been signed, witnessed, notarized, and filed. And he certainly did not know that the real document left him exactly $1. My name is Henry Wallace. I am 73 years old. For most of my life, I believed a father should never publicly humiliate his own child. No matter what happened, family problems remained inside the family. No police, no lawyers, no public confrontation. No shame. My son, Eric, understood that rule better than anyone. He relied on it every time he lied. He relied on it every time he borrowed money and failed to repay it. He relied on it every time he spoke to me with disrespect. And eventually, he relied on it when he decided to rewrite my final wishes while I was recovering from surgery. He believed I would protect his reputation even after discovering the betrayal. He was wrong. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. Subscribe to Amelia for more powerful stories about betrayal, courage, justice, and people who finally stop allowing family to use love as a weapon. I spent 46 years working as a civil engineer in Columbus, Ohio. My specialty was bridge inspection. I began as a young field technician carrying equipment for older engineers. By the time I retired, I supervised structural assessments across 3 counties. I inspected steel beams, concrete supports, expansion joints, foundations, and load-bearing systems. Most people saw a bridge as one solid object. Engineers saw thousands of connected decisions. One weak connection could compromise everything. A small crack did not always mean immediate danger, but ignoring it allowed weather, pressure, and time to make it worse. That principle guided my career. Document the damage. Measure the movement. Never accept appearance as proof of strength. Unfortunately, when it came to my son, I ignored every crack. My wife, Margaret, and I married when I was 25. She was 23 and worked as an elementary school teacher. We met at a church fundraiser after I accidentally spilled coffee on her coat. I apologized for nearly 10 minutes. She laughed and said the coat had always been ugly. That was Margaret. She made discomfort feel temporary. We bought a modest brick house near a quiet park. Over the years, I renovated nearly every room. Margaret chose the colors. I handled the structure. She wanted warmth. I wanted everything level. Together, we built something that felt safe. Our son, Eric, was born 3 years after the wedding. Our daughter, Laura, followed 4 years later. Eric was energetic, charming, and fearless. Laura was quieter, observant, and careful. They were different from the beginning. Eric wanted attention. Laura wanted understanding. As children, both were loved equally, but Eric always seemed to require more. More praise, more opportunities, more forgiveness, more money. If Laura received something, Eric wanted to know whether his version cost more. Margaret noticed it before I did. When Eric was 15, she told me, "He doesn't just want to succeed, he wants everyone else to know he won." I dismissed the comment. I said teenagers were competitive. Margaret did not argue. She rarely needed to. Time usually proved her right. Eric attended a private university and studied business administration. He changed majors twice. He joined an expensive fraternity. His expenses increased every semester. I paid tuition, rent, books, and spending money. Laura attended a state university on scholarship. She worked part-time in the library. She rarely asked for anything. After graduation, Eric entered financial sales. He was good at speaking, and even better at making people feel they were missing an opportunity. He wore tailored suits before he could afford them. He leased a luxury car because, according to him, clients trusted success. He married a woman named Cassandra. Cassandra came from a family that treated money like theater. Her father owned several restaurants. Her mother organized charity events primarily to appear in photographs. Cassandra was polished, attractive, and highly skilled at complimenting people while assessing what they could provide. The first time she visited our house, she admired the antique clock in the hallway. Then she asked whether it had been professionally valued. Margaret smiled. No, we like it because Henry's father repaired it. Cassandra looked disappointed. Meaning without a price was not interesting to her. Eric and Cassandra held an extravagant wedding. They wanted a downtown hotel ballroom, imported flowers, a live orchestra, and a honeymoon in Europe. I offered a fixed amount. Eric said it was not enough. Margaret convinced me to help more. We paid nearly $80,000. Eric promised to repay part of it after receiving his annual bonus. He never did. That became the pattern. A business investment, a tax problem, a house renovation, a private school deposit for the children, a medical expense that later turned out to be cosmetic dental work for Cassandra. Every request arrived as an emergency. Every refusal became betrayal. Laura built a different life. She became a physical therapist, married a public school counselor named David, and raised 2 children in a modest home. She never asked for money. When I offered, she usually refused. Eric called that false humility. I called it responsibility. Margaret became ill when we were both 67. The diagnosis was ovarian cancer. Treatment gave us 2 more years. During that time, Laura visited almost daily. She drove Margaret to appointments. She organized medications. She cooked. She cleaned. She sat quietly when Margaret needed company. Eric visited when his schedule allowed. His visits were emotional but brief. He brought expensive flowers and posted photographs online. He told people how difficult the experience was for him. Margaret noticed everything. She never complained. Near the end of her life, she asked me to update our estate plan. At the time, our will divided everything equally between Eric and Laura. Margaret wanted several charitable gifts added. She also wanted part of the estate placed into education trusts for all 4 grandchildren. I agreed. But after her death, grief made paperwork feel impossible. The old will remained. That delay became one of my greatest mistakes. Eric began asking about the estate within 3 months of the funeral. He tried to sound practical. He asked where the documents were stored. He asked whether the house remained in both names. He asked whether life insurance had been paid. He asked whether I planned to simplify everything by making him executor. I told him I had not decided. He became offended. He said Laura was too emotional to handle financial matters. He said his business experience made him the obvious choice. Laura never asked to be executor. That fact made Eric more irritated. He could not understand someone who did not campaign for control. Over the next several years, my health remained stable. I traveled. I volunteered with an engineering mentorship program. I maintained the house. Eric continued treating my life as something nearing transfer. He referred to my property as the family home, even though he had not lived there for 30 years. He asked whether he could store wine in my basement, because eventually the space would be his anyway. He suggested I give him the antique clock before estate taxes complicated things. He asked whether my retirement accounts named equal beneficiaries. Every question had the same assumption underneath it. My death was not a tragedy. It was an upcoming financial event. I knew that. I simply avoided confronting it. Then came the surgery. I had been experiencing pain in my lower abdomen for several months. Doctors discovered a non-cancerous growth near my intestine. The surgeon explained that removal was necessary but routine. I would spend several days in the hospital and several weeks recovering. Laura offered to stay with me afterward. Eric insisted he should manage the process. He said Laura had work and children. He said Cassandra could organize meals and appointments. His sudden concern should have made me suspicious. Instead, I felt grateful. The surgery occurred on a Monday morning. The procedure lasted nearly 4 hours. Complications kept me in the hospital longer than expected. For the first 2 days, I was heavily medicated. I remember fragments. Nurses. Lights. Laura holding my hand. Eric speaking to someone near the door. Cassandra asking where I kept legal documents. At the time, I assumed they were planning responsibly. On the third afternoon, Eric brought a stack of papers. He said the hospital needed updated emergency authorizations. I was tired. My vision blurred from medication. I told him to leave the documents. He said they needed signatures immediately. Laura arrived before I signed. She looked through the pages and frowned. These aren't hospital forms. Eric said they were estate documents my attorney had prepared. I asked which attorney. He named Richard Boone. Richard had worked at the firm that prepared my old will but retired 2 years earlier. Eric claimed Richard was consulting privately. Laura asked why I had not requested the update myself. Eric became angry. He accused her of creating stress while I was recovering. The argument brought a nurse into the room. The documents disappeared into Eric's briefcase. That night, Laura asked me privately whether I had instructed Eric to change my will. I said no. She looked frightened. She told me Eric had been asking hospital staff whether I was mentally alert enough to sign legal papers. One nurse refused to witness anything. Another said Eric mentioned an urgent deadline. I called my current attorney, Samuel Price. Samuel had taken over Richard Boone's clients. He was methodical, direct, and not easily impressed. I asked whether his office had prepared estate papers for me. He said no. Then he became quiet. Samuel asked whether Eric had access to my old will. He did. A copy remained in a locked cabinet at home. Eric knew the security code because he had helped me retrieve insurance papers after Margaret died. Samuel told me not to confront him. Let him believe you don't understand what he's doing, he said. That advice felt unnatural. I wanted to call Eric immediately. I wanted to demand answers. But bridge inspections had taught me something valuable. When you discovered damage, you did not immediately strike the structure with a hammer. You documented the full condition first. Samuel began investigating. He contacted Richard Boone. Richard denied meeting Eric. He had not prepared any documents. His name was being used without permission. Samuel reviewed the county probate records. No new will had been filed, which was normal because wills usually remained private until death. But a local mobile notary had recorded a canceled appointment at the hospital under my name. The appointment request came from Cassandra's phone. The notary canceled after staff refused access. That explained the papers. Eric had prepared a replacement will. He intended to bring a notary into my hospital room while I was medicated. Laura's arrival interrupted the plan. But that did not mean he stopped. 3 days later, I was transferred to a rehabilitation center for short-term recovery. Eric insisted on taking me there. During the drive, he spoke about family responsibility. He said complicated estates destroyed relationships. He said everything should pass through one capable person. He said Laura would understand if I chose him. I asked whether Cassandra would understand if I chose Laura. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. That would be irresponsible. I asked why. He said Laura lacked financial sophistication. I reminded him she had never asked me for money. He replied, "Exactly, she doesn't understand wealth." That sentence revealed more than he intended. To Eric, restraint was ignorance. Dependence was sophistication. At the rehabilitation center, he visited frequently. He brought papers twice. Each time, I said I was too tired. His patience disappeared. He told me delays created legal risk. I asked what risk. He could not explain. Then he used Margaret. He said she always wanted him to protect the family. That was false. Margaret loved Eric. She also worried about his greed. During her final month, she told me privately that equal inheritance might be unfair if one child spent years taking while the other spent years giving. I had avoided acting on that conversation. Now Eric attempted to recruit her memory into his scheme. Samuel's investigation uncovered the next layer. A paralegal named Denise Carter worked at a small estate planning office across town. Denise had known Cassandra socially. Phone records later showed more than 40 calls between them during my hospitalization. Denise accessed template documents from her employer. She created a will using my old estate plan as a base. The new document made Eric sole beneficiary and executor. It removed Laura. It removed the grandchildren's trusts. It removed Margaret's charities. It granted Eric authority over medical and financial decisions. The document contained my signature, a forgery. It also contained 2 witness signatures. One belonged to Denise. The other belonged to her cousin. Neither had seen me sign anything. The will was legally defective. But Eric did not need it to survive intense scrutiny immediately. He needed it to appear credible after my death. If no one challenged it quickly, he could control the process, access accounts, sell property, and exhaust the estate through legal expenses before Laura understood what happened. Samuel believed Eric planned to replace the original will in my home cabinet. When the time came, he would discover the forged copy. The plan depended on secrecy, so we created a controlled opportunity. I told Eric I expected to return home the following week. I mentioned that the cabinet containing legal documents remained disorganized. His expression changed slightly. 2 nights later, the home security system recorded Eric entering the house. He used the old code. He went directly to my study. He opened the locked cabinet. He remained inside for 11 minutes. Then he left carrying nothing visible. The next morning, Samuel and I inspected the cabinet. The old will was gone. In its place sat the forged document. Eric had completed the substitution. He believed the false will now existed as my official final instruction. I felt something colder than anger. This was not a careless lie. It was not a desperate request. My son entered my home while I recovered from surgery and rewrote my death. He removed his sister. He removed his own children. He removed the charities his mother loved. He gave himself everything. Then he placed the forgery where he expected my family to find it, after I could no longer speak. The cruelty required patience. He imagined my funeral. He imagined everyone grieving. He imagined himself opening the cabinet, finding the document, and expressing surprise. He planned to perform innocence after stealing from the dead. That realization ended something inside me. For years, I had protected Eric from consequences because I feared losing him. I finally understood that I had already lost the son I believed I had. The man remaining knew my love made me easier to exploit. Samuel asked whether I wanted to call the police immediately. We had evidence of unlawful entry, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. I said not yet. I wanted Eric to reveal the document himself. Samuel looked at me carefully. Why? Because he has spent his whole life telling people that misunderstandings explain his behavior. I want witnesses to hear him claim this document is real. We designed the dinner. I told the family I wanted to discuss my estate after surgery, reminded me that life was uncertain. I invited Eric and Cassandra, Laura and her husband, my sister, Elaine, my nephew, Thomas, my 4 grandchildren. Samuel would arrive later, supposedly to answer questions. Eric became enthusiastic. He offered to organize everything. He suggested a formal dinner at my house. I agreed. He asked whether I had located my will. I pretended uncertainty. I think it's still in the study cabinet. He paused. Then he said, "Good. We should probably read it together." Exactly what I expected. Over the next week, Samuel completed my real estate plan. The genuine will reflected Margaret's final wishes and my current judgment. Laura would inherit the house because she had cared for both parents, without asking for reward. But the property would be protected inside a trust, not transferred carelessly. Each grandchild would receive an education and housing fund controlled by an independent fiduciary. The Cancer Foundation Margaret supported would receive a significant gift. My engineering mentorship program would receive funding. My sister would receive the antique clock our father repaired. Several longtime friends would receive personal items. Eric would receive $1. The document explained why. The gift was intentional. It prevented him from claiming accidental omission. A separate letter described the forged will, the unauthorized entry, and the attempted manipulation during my hospitalization. I also removed Eric from all beneficiary designations. He was removed from medical directives. He was removed from emergency access. He was removed from bank authorizations. Every financial doorway closed before the dinner occurred. Samuel filed supporting declarations and secured copies in multiple locations. I completed a full cognitive evaluation. A geriatric psychiatrist confirmed I possessed complete decision-making capacity. The evaluation occurred after surgery and before signing the new will. Eric would not be able to argue that medication or illness influenced me. We also preserved recordings, the home security footage, phone logs, messages recovered from Denise's office, a recording of Cassandra telling Denise that Henry won't understand the difference. Another message from Eric read, "Once it's in the cabinet, nobody can prove when he signed it." He was wrong. Saturday evening arrived under heavy rain. The dining room looked much as it had during holidays with Margaret. I used her white tablecloth. Laura placed flowers in the center. For a moment, grief nearly overwhelmed me. Margaret should have been there. She would have hated the confrontation. She also would have understood why it was necessary. Eric arrived first. He carried 2 bottles of expensive wine. Cassandra wore black and gold. They behaved as if attending a business celebration. Eric entered my study within 5 minutes. He returned, holding the forged will. "Found it," he said. He tried to sound casual. I watched him carry his own evidence toward the table. The rest of the family arrived. Dinner began with strained conversation. My grandchildren discussed school. My sister asked about recovery. Eric repeatedly glanced at the folder beside his chair. After dessert, he stood. Dad wanted us to have an honest conversation about the future. I had said no such thing. But I nodded. He continued. He said surgery had shown all of us how quickly life could change. He said clear planning prevented conflict. He said I had apparently updated my will recently. Laura looked at me. I kept my face neutral. Eric opened the document. He announced that he had found it in my legal cabinet. He said the signature appeared valid. He said 2 witnesses had signed. Then he began reading. The document named him sole executor. He paused to explain that an executor carried heavy responsibility. Cassandra touched his arm sympathetically. He read the section, leaving him the house. He said he planned to preserve it for the family. That was another lie. Investigators had already found emails between him and a developer discussing the potential sale price. He intended to demolish the house and sell the land. He read the financial section. All investments to Eric. All retirement accounts to Eric. All vehicles and personal property to Eric. Laura sat completely still. Her husband placed a hand over hers. My granddaughter Emily looked confused. She asked whether the grandchildren received anything. Eric turned pages. There are no separate provisions, but obviously I would take care of everyone. His own children looked at him differently after that. The document did not trust them. It trusted only him. My sister asked about Margaret's Cancer Foundation. Eric said charitable gifts had been removed. He explained that family should come first. I asked whether Margaret had approved that. He said the document was signed after her death, so it represented my wishes. He looked directly at me. You signed this, right, Dad? The room became silent. That was the moment he wanted. My confirmation. Even a confused nod might later become evidence. I leaned back. Keep reading. His confidence increased. He reached the section granting him medical authority. He explained that if I became unable to make decisions, he would control treatment, housing, and care. Laura interrupted. Dad already has a medical directive. Eric said this replaced it. Laura asked when. Eric became impatient. It's in writing. He continued until the final page. Then he displayed the signature. My name appeared in dark blue ink. The imitation was careful. Not perfect, but convincing enough for relatives who had no reason to suspect fraud. Eric placed the document on the table. He smiled. Dad, I think this proves we all understand what you wanted. I nodded. Then I reached beneath my chair and removed the real folder. You're right, I said. It proves exactly what you wanted. Eric's expression changed. I placed the folder in front of me. Cassandra stared at it. Laura looked from me to Eric. I asked my son where the document came from. He repeated that he found it in the cabinet. I asked whether he had seen it before that night. He said no. I asked whether he knew Denise Carter. His face tightened. Cassandra reached for her wine. Eric said the name sounded familiar, but he could not place it. I nodded toward the doorway. Samuel Price entered the dining room. Eric stopped moving. Samuel carried a legal case and a tablet. He introduced himself to the family. Then he addressed Eric. Denise Carter is the paralegal who created the document you just read. Cassandra placed her glass down too quickly. Wine spilled across the tablecloth. Eric laughed. He said Samuel was mistaken. Samuel opened the tablet. He played an audio recording. Cassandra's voice filled the room. Use the old will. Just remove Laura and the charities. Eric needs everything in one place. No one spoke. Then Denise's voice replied, We still need Henry's signature. Cassandra answered, Copy it from the medical directive. He won't understand the difference. My grandchildren stared at their mother. Cassandra whispered that the recording was illegal. Samuel explained that Denise recorded the conversation and later provided it to protect herself during the investigation. Eric stood. He accused Denise of fabricating evidence. Samuel played another recording. Eric's voice this time. Once it's in the cabinet, nobody can prove when he signed it. My sister covered her mouth. Laura began crying silently. Eric looked at me. The arrogance disappeared. He asked why I had recorded him. I corrected him. I didn't record you. Your accomplice did. He said Denise was not an accomplice. Then he realized the admission hidden inside the denial. Samuel placed printed copies of the phone records on the table. He displayed security footage of Eric entering my study. The date and time appeared clearly. He showed Eric opening the cabinet. He showed him replacing the document. Eric attempted to explain. He said I had asked him to organize the papers. I asked when. He could not answer. I asked why he removed the old will. He said it was outdated. I asked who gave him authority to decide that. He looked toward Cassandra. She looked away. The family dinner had become a courtroom without a judge. Every person he wanted to impress now watched the structure collapse. My nephew Thomas picked up the forged will. He studied the signature. Did you fake Uncle Henry's name? Eric said no. Samuel produced the handwriting analysis. The signature had been digitally copied from a medical directive signed 6 years earlier. Ink testing showed the witnesses signed on different dates. One witness admitted never meeting me. Eric turned toward me again. Dad, we can discuss this privately. I almost smiled. He had rewritten my will privately. He had entered my house privately. He had planned to take everything privately. Now that witnesses existed, privacy suddenly mattered. No, I said. You wanted the family to hear the will. They're going to hear all of it. I opened the real folder. I explained that the valid will had been signed after a complete mental competency evaluation. It had independent witnesses. It had notarization. It had video confirmation. It was stored securely with Samuel's firm. Eric asked what it contained. I handed the document to Samuel. He began reading. The house would pass into a trust benefiting Laura and, later, the grandchildren. Laura looked shocked. She said she did not expect it. I told her that was one reason she could be trusted. The education funds were described. My grandchildren listened closely. Margaret's Cancer Foundation would receive a large donation. My engineering mentorship program would receive support. My sister would receive the clock. Elaine smiled through tears. Then Samuel reached Eric. To my son, Eric Wallace, I leave the sum of $1. Eric's chair moved backward sharply. Cassandra said, That's not legal. Samuel explained that it was completely legal. The clause continued. The $1 gift was intentional and reflected my knowledge of Eric's repeated financial exploitation, attempted forgery, unlawful entry, and effort to manipulate estate documents during medical recovery. Eric's face turned red. He accused Laura of influencing me. Laura stood. I didn't know any of this. He shouted that she had always wanted the house. Laura replied that she had never asked for it. That truth enraged him more. People who desired everything could not understand those who did not. Eric pointed at me. He said surgery had affected my judgment. Samuel placed the psychiatric evaluation on the table. He said I had been examined before signing. Full capacity. No cognitive impairment. No undue influence. Eric said the psychiatrist could be challenged. Samuel nodded. Of course. But the court will also consider the forged document, the recordings, the security footage, and the witness admissions. Eric stopped speaking. My granddaughter Emily looked at him. "Dad, were you really going to take Grandpa's house?" He said everything would have remained in the family, asked why the will gave nothing to her or her brother. He said he would have managed the money. His son, Michael, asked whether that meant they were not trusted. Eric became frustrated. "This is adult business," Michael replied. "It's our family too." For the first time, Eric saw the cost beyond money. His children understood what he was. Cassandra tried to regain control. She said everyone was emotional. She suggested postponing the conversation. I told her the conversation was over. Samuel then explained that the forged will and supporting evidence had already been provided to investigators. Cassandra's face lost all color. Eric stared at me. "You called the police on your own son?" I answered calmly. "My son attempted to steal from me after my death. I called the police on the man who did that." He said I was destroying the family. I looked around the table. Laura crying. The grandchildren shocked. My sister trembling. Margaret's tablecloth stained with wine. "The family was damaged when you decided my signature belonged to you." Eric stood. He told Cassandra to leave. Samuel asked them to remain because investigators were waiting outside. At that moment, 2 detectives entered through the front hallway. They did not shout. They did not handcuff anyone immediately. They identified themselves and asked Eric and Cassandra to accompany them for questioning. Eric looked toward me one final time. He expected rescue. That expression was familiar. It appeared when he crashed my car at 17, when he lost money in a bad investment, when creditors called, when Cassandra demanded a larger wedding. Every time, I stepped in. Every time, I taught him that consequences were temporary because Dad would solve them. Not this time. I remained seated. Eric whispered, "Please." I said nothing. The detectives escorted them out. The front door closed. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then Emily began crying. Laura moved beside her. I felt terrible. Exposure protected the truth, but it did not prevent pain. My grandchildren had lost their image of their parents in one evening. My sister had lost trust in her nephew. Laura learned her brother intended to erase her from our family's future. I had chosen witnesses because secrecy protected Eric. But witnesses also carried the burden of knowing. I apologized. Laura shook her head. "You didn't do this." That sentence mattered. For years, I believed exposing wrongdoing created damage. Laura reminded me that the wrongdoing created it. After the family left, I remained alone at the dining table. Margaret's photograph stood on a shelf near the doorway. I imagined her sitting across from me. Would she have approved? I did not know. She valued peace. She also valued honesty. Perhaps she would have cried. Perhaps she would have asked whether there was another way. But there had been many other ways. Eric could have asked for help. He could have accepted equal inheritance. He could have respected Laura. He could have honored his mother's charities. He chose forgery. He chose secrecy. He chose everything. The investigation moved quickly. Denise Carter cooperated fully. She admitted creating the documents and arranging false witnesses. She claimed Cassandra pressured her. Messages showed Eric directed key decisions. He provided exact account values. He supplied the old will. He instructed Denise to remove Laura and the charities. He discussed replacing the document inside my cabinet. The evidence was overwhelming. Cassandra accepted a plea agreement first, as she admitted conspiracy, attempted fraud, and participation in forged estate documents. She avoided prison but received probation, restitution obligations, and professional restrictions. Her family blamed Eric publicly. Their marriage began collapsing immediately. Eric refused responsibility. He claimed I had verbally instructed him to simplify the will. He said Denise misunderstood. He said Cassandra acted independently. He said security footage merely showed him organizing papers. The forged signature remained impossible to explain. His attorney eventually advised a plea. The charges included forgery, identity theft, attempted financial exploitation of an older adult, unlawful entry, and conspiracy. At sentencing, Eric asked to speak. He wore a plain gray suit. Without the tailored confidence, he looked older. He said he had been afraid. He said my surgery made him realize he could lose me. He said complicated estates created conflict. He claimed he wanted to protect the family from Laura's emotional decisions. Even then, he blamed his sister. Then he said the financial pressure had become unbearable. His business was failing. He and Cassandra carried nearly $600,000 in debt. Their house had multiple liens. He believed inheritance would eventually solve everything. Eventually. That word again. He did not merely expect money after my death. He had already spent it in his mind. My continued life delayed his financial rescue. That truth made the forged will even darker. The judge asked whether I wished to make a statement. I stood. I said my son did not change my will because he feared family conflict. He changed it because my choices stood between him and my assets. He removed his sister because equality felt like loss. He removed his children because trust required sharing. He removed charities because generosity towards strangers offended his entitlement. He gave himself medical authority because control over my body supported control over my estate. I told the court that elder financial abuse often arrived wearing family concern. A child asked for passwords. A relative offered to organize papers. Someone said planning was urgent. Then the older person's signature appeared where it did not belong. I said the greatest danger was not always confusion. Sometimes the older person understood perfectly, but feared exposing their own child. Shame protected the abuser. I refused to provide that protection any longer. Eric looked at me. For the first time, I saw something resembling genuine regret. But regret after discovery did not erase intent. The judge imposed prison time, followed by supervised release. Eric lost his financial licenses. His business closed. His house entered foreclosure. Cassandra moved in with her parents. Their children chose to live with relatives while she stabilized her life. The family structure collapsed. Some relatives blamed me. They said $1 was cruel. They said prison was too much. They said Margaret would have wanted forgiveness. People often become generous with forgiveness when someone else paid the cost. I listened. Then I explained that forgiveness and access were different. I did not wake each morning wishing Eric suffering. I did not celebrate his sentence. But I would not restore inheritance to prove I had a good heart. Money without accountability would confirm his belief that family pressure always worked. Laura struggled with the inheritance plan. She asked me to divide the house equally again if Eric changed. I told her the trust was not a reward for being the better child. It was protection for the property and grandchildren. She said she did not want Eric to believe she stole his share. I reminded her he attempted to steal hers. Still, her discomfort showed her character. She did not enjoy winning. That made her trustworthy. The grandchildren's response changed me most. Emily visited several weeks after sentencing. She brought the forged will copy Samuel had provided. She placed it on my kitchen table. Why did Dad leave us nothing? I told her I did not know exactly. Perhaps he planned to control everything. Perhaps he assumed his children would depend on him. Perhaps ownership mattered more than giving. She looked at the page. He always said everything he did was for us. People often say that. Sometimes they mean it. Sometimes children become a moral disguise for adult greed. I told Emily that her father loved her. I believed that. But love did not automatically produce honest decisions. People could love someone and still harm them through control, pride, or fear. She asked whether I still loved Eric. Yes. The answer surprised her. Then why did you let him go to prison? Because loving someone doesn't mean stopping every consequence. Sometimes consequences are the only thing left that might reach them. Emily thought about that. Then she folded the document. She never defended him again, but she did not stop loving him either. I understood. The real will funded the education trusts, immediately through gifts I could make while alive. I wanted the grandchildren to understand that support came from relationship, not death. I attended Emily's university orientation. I helped Michael purchase tools for an engineering program. I spent time with Laura's children. I stopped waiting for inheritance to become the only language of care. Margaret's Cancer Foundation received its first donation on what would have been her birthday. The director sent a letter describing how the funds would help families pay for transportation and temporary housing during treatment. I read it at the dining table. The same table where Eric read the forged will. One document attempted to turn death into private wealth. The other turned memory into help. That contrast brought peace. I also changed the house. Not because I wanted to erase Eric. Because the rooms carried too much tension. I converted my study into a mentorship room for young engineers. The locked cabinet was removed. The forged will had been stored there like a hidden crack. I replaced it with open shelves. Students used the room to study bridge design, mathematics, and licensing exams. The antique clock continued ticking in the hallway. My sister Elaine visited often. She joked that receiving it after my death felt morbid now. I gave it to her early. Inheritance did not need to wait. She cried. The clock had belonged to our father. Watching her receive it with gratitude reminded me that valuable objects did not always create greed. Character determined what value became. 2 years passed. Eric wrote from prison. The first letters blamed Cassandra, then Denise, then debt, then me. He said the dinner was designed to humiliate him. He was right about one part. I designed the dinner to create witnesses, but humiliation came from his own words being heard. Eventually, his letters changed. He stopped discussing the house. He stopped requesting legal money. He stopped accusing Laura. One letter contained a simple sentence. I thought your death was the solution to my life. I read it several times. That was the first complete truth he offered. He wrote that each financial failure made inheritance feel more necessary. He began viewing my assets as already belonging to him. My surgery frightened him, not because I might die, but because I might recover and change the old will. He rushed to secure what he believed was his. He admitted removing his children because he wanted direct control. He admitted using Margaret's memory because it weakened my resistance. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not ask for money. He ended with, I became someone Mom would not recognize. I placed the letter beside Margaret's photograph. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry for my son. Not the defendant. Not the forger. The boy who once waited near the window for me to return from bridge inspections. The teenager who called me after his first failed exam. The young man who danced with his mother at his wedding. Those versions had been real. So was the man who forged my will. Love did not require choosing one truth. I could remember the good and protect myself from the harm. I wrote back. The letter was short. I told him I had read his words. I told him accountability mattered. I said I hoped he continued changing. I did not promise restored inheritance. I did not promise immediate reconciliation. I did not discuss money. For the first time in our relationship, the conversation contained no financial rescue. After his release, Eric entered supervised employment far outside financial services. He lived in a small apartment. Cassandra divorced him. His children maintained limited contact. He asked to meet me. We met at a public park near the river. He looked thinner, older. We sat on a bench. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he apologized without explanation. No debt story, no blame, no request. He said he understood why the will left him $1. I told him the dollar was not revenge. It was a legal statement that I had not forgotten him. He nodded. That's what hurt most. I asked why. Because being forgotten would mean you didn't know me. $1 meant you knew exactly what I had become. That answer showed more awareness than anything he said before prison. We did not rebuild the relationship that day. We began something smaller. Honest conversation. Occasional meetings. Clear boundaries. Eric never received access to accounts, property, or legal authority again. He knew that. Real change had to survive without reward. Several relatives encouraged me to restore part of his inheritance. I refused. Forgiveness did not rewrite consequences. The estate plan represented years of behavior and the need to protect others. If Eric lived responsibly, he could build his own future. That was not cruelty. It was adulthood. Today, I am 76. The house remains mine, protected inside a trust. Laura will not own it directly. The grandchildren will benefit under clear rules. The charities remain included. The $1 clause remains. Eric knows it. He no longer argues. Sometimes he joins family dinner. The first time he returned to the dining room, he stared at the place where he stood reading the forged will. I wondered whether he would leave. Instead, he sat beside his daughter. He did not speak about the past. He helped clear plates. Small actions. No performance. No speeches. Trust returns that way, if it returns at all. Not through dramatic promises, through repeated, ordinary honesty. The forged will remains in Samuel's evidence archive. I could destroy it. I choose not to. It reminds me how close I came to losing control of my own legacy. Had Laura arrived 15 minutes later at the hospital, I might have signed something while medicated. Had the nurse allowed the mobile notary inside, Eric might have created a stronger document. Had I died unexpectedly, the family might have accepted the forgery. Elder exploitation often succeeds not because the plan is perfect. It succeeds because the victim is tired, ill, ashamed, or afraid to accuse family. That is why preparation matters. Keep independent copies. Use trustworthy attorneys. Limit access. Review beneficiary designations. Never sign documents you cannot see. Do not rely on one child for every role. And never allow someone to create urgency around your estate while you are vulnerable. A legitimate plan can wait until you are alert. A dishonest plan demands speed. Eric believed the forged will would speak after I no longer could. So I made sure my voice entered the room first. That was the purpose of the dinner. He wanted witnesses to his authority. I gave him witnesses to the truth. He wanted to announce ownership. He announced evidence. He wanted the family to believe I chose him. Instead, they heard exactly how he attempted to choose himself. Some people still ask whether public exposure was necessary. Could I have confronted him privately? Yes. He would have denied everything. Could I have changed the will without telling him? Yes. He would have challenged it after my death. Could I have forgiven him and destroyed the evidence? Yes. He would have learned that even forgery could be survived through family pressure. The dinner created clarity. No secret conversations. No different stories for different relatives. Everyone heard the same document. Everyone heard the recordings. Everyone saw the evidence. Secrecy had been Eric's strongest protection. Witnesses removed it. The deepest lesson was not about inheritance. It was about entitlement. Eric did not begin with forgery. He began by believing my labor belonged to him eventually. That belief grew. Loans became advances. Gifts became obligations. My home became his future property. My investments became his rescue plan. My death became a financial deadline. By the time he changed the will, he no longer experienced the act as stealing. He experienced it as securing what he deserved. Entitlement can distort morality that completely. That is why boundaries must exist before crisis. Every time I rescued him, I weakened one. Every time I ignored disrespect, I weakened another. The final forgery crossed a line I should have made visible years earlier. I cannot change that past, but I can speak honestly about it. A parent's love should not become a child's financial strategy. An inheritance is not a salary for being born. A will is not a negotiation controlled by the loudest relative. And illness does not reduce a person's right to decide what happens to everything they built. My son changed my will while I was recovering from surgery. He believed my weakness created his opportunity. He forgot that recovery does more than heal the body. Sometimes it clears the mind. I recovered in time to inspect the structure. The cracks were everywhere. Forged signatures. False witnesses. Secret calls. Unauthorized entry. Greed disguised as family planning. Once documented, the entire design failed. At the family dinner, Eric read the forged will as if it were a bridge carrying him toward wealth. He did not know the supports had already been removed. He reached the final page. Then the structure collapsed beneath the weight of truth. I did not push him. I did not shout. I simply let him finish reading. Sometimes the most powerful response to a lie is allowing the liar to explain it completely before presenting the evidence. That night, my son believed he was reading my final wishes. In reality, he was reading his own character aloud. The real will said something different. It said love does not erase judgment. It said generosity belongs where trust exists. It said my wife's values would survive. It said my grandchildren's futures mattered more than one man's greed. And it said that even at 73, after surgery, grief, and years of manipulation, my voice still belonged to me. Tell me in the comments whether Henry made the right decision by allowing Eric to read the forged will in front of the entire family before revealing the truth. Subscribe to Amelia for more powerful stories about family betrayal, hidden strength, justice, and people who finally take back control of their own lives. The years teach much which the days never know.